I don't know how to start this, I'm still in shock. Like they say, it's best to start from the beginning. I'm a salesman, I sell fax machines, talk about a dying industry, but it pays surprisingly well. I travel the country with Darren, he's not my boss, but my senior. I do the tech demo, hardly modern technology and not very taxing, and he does the commercials. We live quite far away from each other, but as our meetings are usually London way, I pick him up and drive the remainder of the journey together, but yesterday we were late. I hated being late, there's nothing worse than a bad first impression. Presentation comes first, always wear a suit and clean shoes. Darren said you can tell a lot about a person by how clean their shoes were. Second is punctuality. I told Darren to phone ahead, tell them we were going to be a little late. He said we'd be fine, he knew the area, and it was only going to be a couple of minutes. We sat in traffic behind a three-way stoplight put there for roadworks. When the cars finally moved, I was initially relieved, before seeing the road was closed in the opposite direction. I made a mental note to worry about that later. The car park was empty except for a single beat-up lime green beetle, rust crawling over it as if it were a disease. When we got out of the car, I had to stop myself from swearing. I hadn't put on my tie. I'd usually park up and do that before arriving, presentation was the key. It's fine, I know the clients, we go way back, Darren said, smiling. I didn't like that, I felt naked. But I could see an older woman staring out of the window of the reception area. It was too late now, I'd been spotted. I opened the boot, slung my laptop over my shoulder, and heaved out the fax machine. I followed Darren in, he held open the door, then signed us in. He'd only recently come back to work from a serious heart attack and today was the first day he'd not complained and asked to carry. He knew better than that now. She was still staring out of the window, the old woman, wearing a black dress and those glasses on a chain like a librarian would wear. My husband won't be long, won't you take a seat, she said, before turning and gingerly escaping into the office behind the desk. I put the fax machine on the floor. I never sat when waiting for a meeting, it puts you in an inferior position, you want to meet the client on the level. You okay? I said to Darren, whose hand shook as he put a small plastic cup under the water cooler and poured himself a drink. Fine, he said, downing the glass, new medication. I saw a bead of sweat roll down his forehead and disappear under his collar. His black tie was pulled taut around his neck, making his skin fold over. I wanted to tell him it was probably bad for his circulation, but he never listened to me. Come on in, an old man said, as he poked his head around the doorframe. I lugged the fax machine in and placed it next to the chairs on the opposite side of the table. Darren introduced us. Steve here has a great demo lined up for you. Now not only is the new model quicker than the last, it uses 50% less toner. I don't want to know about that, the old man said, I'm Ted and this is my wife Elsa. We want to know about you. We are thinking about changing suppliers, and the guys we saw yesterday were pretty convincing. Okay, I said, suddenly feeling off balance. I had my routine, my patter, I had it honed. I wasn't used to ad-libbing a sales gig. What do you want to know? I said, leaning back, reaching for my tie and realizing it wasn't there. We don't wear ties here, you're fine, Ted said, smiling at me, how old are you? I'm 32, sir. Been doing this job for 10 years now. Darren and I have been working together for, is it 5 years? Darren nodded, and I noticed his face was no longer sweating. If anything, mine was. Do you like each other? Yeah, he's been a great friend to me. He's going to be my best man, in a couple of months. I've told him not to arrange anything strenuous for the stag do. Ted looked over at Darren. I had a heart attack recently. Steve was the one who gave me CPR, saved my life. How wonderful, I mean, It's so nice you can be there for each other. Are you a religious man, Steve? Elsa asked. Well, I don't practice, but I believe there's a God, probably. I mean, yeah, I believe in God. That's good, we are very spiritual here. Elsa grabbed Ted's hand and squeezed. The conversation went on for another 10 minutes, where they continued to ask questions about my past and my family. Then one thing Elsa said took me off guard. Have you ever killed a man? No, God no. How do you know? I think I'd remember that, I said, reaching for my tie again. That damn thing had put me right off my game. Maybe not directly, but have you thought about an interaction you may have had, like letting a car out of a junction, only for that car to be involved in a crash later on? It's almost certain that you've caused the death of someone, just by interacting with them. I didn't know what to say. I looked towards Darren for an answer. He shrugged his shoulders, his eyes wide, and shook his head. I never thought about it, to be honest, man. Elsa whispered into Ted's ear for a moment. We'll use you, sorry to be so abrupt, but we have somewhere to be, Ted said, holding out his hand to shake mine. When we shook, I didn't say anything. I felt his tight grip, and the sweat from my hand transferred to his. I'll write up the paperwork and get it over to you in the morning, Darren said, as he stood up. Almost in a daze, I picked up the fax machine. Darren held the doors open and I placed it in the boot, along with my laptop. What the fuck was that? I said to Darren, as I reversed out of the parking space. A sale, he said, they loved you. I knew they would. I'm very glad we do this together. But I didn't show them anything. You didn't have to, you sold yourself, that's half the job, come on, you must have realized that before. From within, Ted and Elsa stared out of the window, their gazes vacant, but fixed on me. As we got to the junction, I saw the sign saying road closed. Damn it, I forgot about that, give me a minute, I said, reaching for the GPS. It's okay, Darren said, I know a way back. Turn left. Darren's sense of direction was terrible, but I was intrigued. We followed the road, going in the opposite direction to where we came from. Turn here, he said, pointing. That's a graveyard, I said, reading the sign that said cemetery, no through road, it says we can't. Trust me, he said, so I did. I slowed to a crawl, not wanting to disturb the dead that slept under the graves that lined both sides of the road. We were in the old section, all the stones were either broken or leaned heavily or both. We followed the road as it bore to the right. Every now and then, I saw a fresh bunch of flowers lie silently on the old grave sites. I wondered if the groundskeeper put them there, or distant relatives. I felt for the people who lay there forgotten. Maybe they didn't have family anymore, or maybe they didn't care. It was then I knew I wanted to be cremated. As we drove further into the cemetery, I noticed a road that led out to the far side, though a metal gate stood in the way. How about we open that? I said. No, carry on, Darren replied, and I watched as the gate disappeared into the distance. Moments later we stopped. A line of cars in front of us didn't move. I think they have a funeral on. I looked behind and started to reverse. What are you doing? I'm going to go through that gate. I slammed on the brakes as a car came into view behind me. Fucking hell. We're going to have to go forward. It'll be fine, calm down. The cars in front had moved to the side now, parking up on the grass verges. Carefully, I pulled out, making sure not to drive on the grass to the right, and over countless gravesites. A man in a suit walked in front of us, and waved me to park up. Great, I said, he thinks we are here for the funeral. I ignored him, and gestured that I needed to pass. Calmly he walked over to the car, and I opened the window. Good morning, sir. Please park up on the space on the left. You're mistaken, we need to. Darren grabbed my arm. Just park up, when they're all gone, we can leave. Don't make a scene, people here will be grieving. I sighed and parked along the verge. What now? I asked. Come on, you're a salesman, you can pretend. You serious? He produced a mischievous grin, damn serious. We stood next to the car, and I felt out of place. You should put your tie on, Darren suggested. Really? It would look a little disrespectful not to. I shook my head, opened the boot and pulled out 3 ties. Shall I wear the red one with musical notes, the blue one with the paisley design, or this yellow number? I'd go with the blue one. For the first time ever, Darren standing there with his black tie, looked like the professional one. Why are you wearing a black tie? I said, as I frantically tried to remember a half Windsor knot without a mirror. It's neutral. You're only supposed to wear them to funerals or dinner parties. Well, I'm not out of place today, am I? We continued to stand next to the car as we watched all the mourners leave theirs. This isn't right, I said, clasping my hands in front of me, trying to become the character I was portraying. More cars arrived, and the line of vehicles grew. Look at all these graves, I said. How many do you think have been visited in the last 5 years, or 30 years? Not many, I wouldn't have thought. I want to be cremated, I don't want to be forgotten. Make sure Susie knows. Me too. Yeah, I will. We stood in silence, seeing more people walk hand in hand towards the church. The man in the suit approached us. Please make your way, the ceremony will be starting soon. He placed his hand on my back and gently nudged me. Are we really doing this? It appears so, Darren said, and I could tell he was enjoying himself. What the fuck, surely this is disrespectful. We are 2 more people come to mourn the loss of a fellow human being, how can that be disrespectful? We can't walk this way, I said, as we approached some graves. The thought of walking over someone's eternal resting place made me shudder. We cut across the grounds and joined the main path that led to the church. Do you think they dig up the graves when they run out of space? I'd hope not. Look how many there are. I did some mental arithmetic, trying to get a guesstimate of the number of plots throughout the grounds. There has to only be around 500 to 700 plots here. How many people must have died over the past 100 years? Thousands. They must do it. I bet there's a mass grave of all the people who didn't pay a lot. From behind I heard a young woman cry. I turned to see her, a man. I assumed her spouse stared daggers at me. I'm sorry, I said. Her demeanor changed as she glanced at Darren. So sorry for your loss, he said to her. Thank you, she said, and the pair moved past us. What was that? I said in a whisper. Salesmanship, they don't know we aren't supposed to be here. We stopped as we reached the entrance to the church. We really doing this? I asked again. No turning back now. You are a really good friend. I laughed, not too loud as to look out of place. Remember to mention this in your best man speech. He smiled and put his hand on my shoulder. Along the main road leading to us we saw the hearse. Here we go, I said. Why did it have to happen now? He's so young, a woman said from behind. I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't turn. When it's your time, a man said. I'm going to miss him so much. Me too. It took an eternity for the hearse to stop in front of us. Another black car behind came to a halt and out stepped 5 men. Sir, could you help? The suited man said to Darren. Sure, what do you need? We only have 5 pallbearers. Would you be kind enough to help? I'd be honored, Darren replied. Excuse me, his health isn't great, let me do it. Nonsense, he said to me, I'm fine now, the doctors told me. They never expected you to carry a coffin. He gave me a glare that said, "Shut the fuck up," so I did. He never listened to me. All I could think about was how I was going to tell our manager Darren had another heart attack carrying a coffin on the way back from our meeting. How on earth could I explain that?
"Thank you so much," the suited man said, and led him over to the hearse. I anxiously shifted from one foot to the other as I watched them in the distance slide the coffin out and haul it over their shoulders. "How do you know them?" an old woman asked me. I panicked. "I work with him," I said. "That's nice, he's always said how much he liked his work." I wanted to correct her, to say I was talking about Darren, but I didn't, as then I'd need to explain I wasn't supposed to be here. As if everyone knew what to do, they created 2 lines and allowed the coffin to pass. I felt my heart race for Darren, wanting to take the weight off his shoulders, so he wouldn't have to do what he was doing. Instead, I silently watched them pass. I caught Darren's eye and he winked at me. One by one the fellow mourners filed in behind them. In that moment, standing alone outside, except for the suited man who checked his watch, I thought about casually walking back to the car and waiting there. Then, in the distance, I noticed something. It was hard to miss. A lime green Beetle, coming around the bend and passing all the cars that had parked up along the verge. "What are the chances?" I said to myself. "Sir, please make your way inside," the suited man said. "Okay," I replied without a second thought. I'd got this far, I wasn't going to leave Darren on his own in there. I pushed open the large oaken doors, seeing all the mourners in place in the pews, their identical black outfits like the crowd at a football match. I watched as the coffin was put in place and searched for a seat. Around halfway up there was a space, enough for Darren and I to sit. I sat and was relieved to see Darren, at the front, wasn't breathing heavily or sweating. He took the place next to me and we waited in silence. Moments later we heard the doors open for a final time. We turned in unison to see Ted and Elsa walk hand in hand up the aisle. I snapped my head back around, not wanting them to notice me. They passed by without incident and took a place in the front row. "Jesus," I whispered to Darren, "what are they doing here? They know we're not supposed to be here. They will complain. We may lose our jobs." "Shoo, just be quiet, it will be fine." But it wasn't fine. I needed this job. I was paying for a wedding. What was I going to say to Susie? I lost my job because I went to a funeral by accident. I felt an anxious sweat begin to grow. Darren, on the other hand, couldn't have looked more calm. I jumped as the doors clicked shut. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the life of a man, a son. He wasn't a father, but he loved his nephews and nieces as if they were his own. God isn't vengeful, he tests our faith to prove that we are worthy of his love." The pastor continued for a while and then said, "Our first hymn is Ode to Joy, you'll find it on page 7 of your hymn books." We stood and sang. Like I told Ted, I wasn't religious, but as the congregation began to sing, I felt a spirituality I hadn't felt since I was a child. It was as if God himself was here with us, and even though I wasn't meant to be there, I felt as if I was welcome. As the song ended, Ted stood up, and I felt my heart race. I looked down at my feet. It's great to have so many familiar faces here today, some old, like my mother Ruth, and Elsa's father Edward. And it's lovely to see some new faces too. My heart sunk. It felt as if he was talking directly to me. I peered at Darren, his head was held high and proud, as if he belonged there. "Our son is a good man, a fair man." I couldn't have asked for a better person to bring up. I remember when he was 5 and he rode his bike for the first time without stabilizers. He rode in circles on the gravel behind the house, his face was so full of energy, and that never stopped, never. "Darren, we're at their son's funeral." Oh my God. He ignored me. My wife doesn't want to speak, she's a little emotional, and who could blame her? He gave out an awkward laugh. But we both love him, and we are thankful so many of his family and friends could be here to see him off. If there's anyone else who'd like to say some words, please do. I heard Ted's shoes echo around the cavernous hall. How about you? I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for someone to get up. When no one did, Darren nudged me. I looked up to see Ted stand in the aisle looking directly at me. He smiled and tilted his head back toward the altar. No, I can't do this, Darren. This is insane. There's no turning back now. If we lose the sale, we will lose our jobs. Without thinking, I found myself on my feet. Everyone stared at me. I don't know them, I don't even know their name. Pretend it's me, Darren said, grinning. He was enjoying this way too much. I wondered if it was my panic that tickled him, or whether it was the insanity of the situation.
At the end of a quiet road, behind a veil of twisted black oak trees, there was a house. A woman lived there. On bitter nights like this one, she sat by the fire and read until she grew tired enough for sleep. But on this night, as her lids grew heavy, she was startled by a sound. A sound she wasn't accustomed to hearing these days. Who could be calling, she wondered. And this late? She rose from her chair and picked up the phone. Hello. I'm going to kill you, a man with a deep voice said. Who is this? She asked. No answer. Who is this? She repeated, her hand trembling. There was a click. Silence. She quickly dialed the police and explained what had happened. The officer told her to wait while he traced the call. After a few moments he said, the call is coming from inside your house. That doesn't make sense, she said. How could someone be inside my house? He probably broke in, he said. Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. And that's not everything, he said. I'm not a police officer. You aren't? No, I'm the killer guy from before. I never actually hung up. But I heard a click. The man made a clicking sound with his mouth. Like that, he said. Wow, that's really good. Thanks. So, are you really inside my house? Yeah, totally. Where? The man's breathing grew heavier. I like your hair, he said. Wait, you can see me? Yes. Wait, you like my hair? It's really nice. If you can see me, then what am I wearing? Looks like a blouse from Banana and a skirt from. And Taylor Loft. Wow, you really can see me. I can also see, wait, what the hell is that? What? There's a person, a ghost hovering near you. It's sort of hard to trust you after the click thing. No, I'm serious, over by the couch. The woman turned and gasped, oh my God, I see it. I knew this place was haunted. Jesus Christ. Is it a kid? He's all translucent. Looks like a little boy. What does he want? I think he wants to play. He's holding a kite. The ghost boy floated closer and spoke, play with me. Oh my God, he can talk, the man said. Play with me, the ghost boy repeated. No thank you, the man said. He can't hear you, the woman said. Put me on speaker. Hold on, she said. Try now. We don't want to play with you. Okay, Junior. Just run along. Why? The boy said, cocking his head to one side. Playing is fun. No it isn't, the man yelled. Who are you? The ghost boy asked the woman. Why are you in my house? Oh, I'm Ellen. I actually live in this house now. And the voice you're hearing on the phone is... I didn't get your name. It's, Douglas, the man said, reluctantly. Douglas is hiding somewhere in here to kill me, right, Douglas? Ellen said. That was the plan, Douglas said. And you guys are scared of a kid with a kite? Jesus, the ghost boy said. A dead kid with a kite. Douglas said. Advertisement. There was a heavy silence for several moments. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Expecting someone? Douglas asked. It rang again. Ellen walked over and opened it. Standing there was a hulking man in ratty clothes, barely concealing a bloodied machete behind his back. Pardon me, ma'am, he said. My car broke down and I was wondering if I could charge my phone in your house. Sorry, I don't think so, Ellen said, starting to close the door. The man shoved his foot inside. Well, I do think so, he said. Ellen stumbled and fell to the ground. Who the hell is that? Douglas screamed. I'm a homicidal drifter. Who the hell are you? The drifter said, confused. Where's that voice coming from? He's a killer hiding in my house, Ellen said, holding up the phone. Douglas. Hiding? Where? The drifter asked, looking around nervously. He's in the closet, the ghost boy said. What in the shit is that? The drifter screamed. I'm a ghost. I used to live here like 100 years ago. Oh, and let me guess, you don't want to play with me. Hell, no, I don't want to play with you. What's going on in here? What's going on is no one will play with me. For Christ's sake, no one's flying a kite at night, Douglas shouted. Give it up. The ghost boy began to cry. Now you made him cry, Douglas, Ellen chided. Sorry if I'm a little on edge because you let a killer into the house, Douglas said. Video from the New Yorker. Swift justice, a Taliban courtroom in session. First of all, I didn't let him in, he busted in, Ellen said. It's true, I did, the drifter said. Second of all, you're also a killer, Douglas. Touché, the drifter said. And third of all, don't say sorry to me, say sorry to the dead kid. Advertisement. Okay, okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you, Douglas said. The ghost boy smiled. Everyone seemed to calm down a bit, until the doorbell rang again. Ellen walked toward the door. Don't, the three others shouted. She opened it and peered outside. There was no one there, just a large wooden box on the front step. There's a box out here, Ellen said. There's no label or anything. I have a bad feeling about this box, the drifter said. I hate this box, the ghost boy said. Ellen ignored them and carried it inside. She turned to the drifter. May I? He wiped his machete on his pants and handed it to her. She popped open the top, reached in, and pulled out a tattered clown doll with a sinister grin. What is it? What is it? Douglas yelled, through the phone. Some sort of clown doll, Ellen said. I don't want to play with a clown doll, the ghost boy said, beginning to cry. Why don't we just put this thing back in the box before it gives us all nightmares, okay, the drifter said. Look, there's a string, Ellen said, pulling it before anyone could object. The clown began to wheeze, its eyes shifted from side to side, and an eerily cheerful song emanated from its open mouth. The clown let out a terrible cackle. Really psyched you pulled the string, Ellen, Douglas said. I mean, come on underscore. Advertisement. What does the clown mean? The ghost boy asked. I think he was pretty clear, the drifter said, wringing his hands. He's going to kill us all, basically. How's the doll going to kill us? Ellen asked. Each of them silently surveyed the room in anticipation. Suddenly, the lights went out. What happened? Who did that? The ghost boy screamed. I can't see anything, the drifter said. I literally can't see anything because it's too dark now. Through the darkness, Ellen let out a cry, "Oh no! Ellen!" Douglas screamed, "What is it?" "It's the clown. It killed her," said the drifter, his voice shaking. "And we're next." "He killed Ellen," the ghost boy sobbed. Seconds later, the lights flashed back on. Ellen's hands were raised to her face. "My stupid contact lens slid out of place," she said, spreading her eyelids apart and poking at her pupil. "So annoying." "Oh, please don't do that," the drifter said, squirming. "What's she doing?" Douglas asked, with dread. "Touching her actual eyeball with her actual finger," the ghost boy said, wincing. "It's a real slippery one," Ellen said, maneuvering deeper into her eye. "Can't get a grip on it." Douglas gagged. "Oh my God, that's so vile." The drifter raised his fist to his mouth with a grimace, as Ellen pressed her thumb against her wet, quivering eyeball for leverage. "Ugh, now I think it's folded up under my lid," said Ellen, stretching her lid out. "Can someone look and tell me if they can see it?" There was a click from the phone. "Douglas? Was that a real click?" The ghost boy faded into the wall, saying, "I'm out." "Ghost boy." She heard the front door opening behind her. "Drifter? You, too?" The drifter turned to her with a dazed look. "I hate this place so much," he said, then dropped the machete from his limp hand and walked into the darkness.